Gender is an elusive concept. According to the World Health Organization, it is the characteristics of women, men, girls, and boys that are socially constructed. That means the norms, behaviors, and roles associated with being a man, woman, girl, or boy, as well as relationships with each other. In other words, gender is not our sex that we're assigned at birth, but it is the set of cultural values that we typically associate with that sex assigned at birth. And things get muddy when you consider the fact that different people take on different traits and that people who don't fall into either male or female sexes assigned at birth also exist. So ultimately, while we have these gender constructs within our society, each of us is living out our own gender identity. In the US, less than 1% of adults and about 3% of children under the age of 18 identify as transgender, meaning they don't align with the sex that they were assigned at birth. But for that other 99 to 97% of people, they're also living out their own version of gender expression. At the end of the day, gender identity and gender expression is based on the way that we have experienced gender within society. Because it's this set of cultural norms, the only true gender definition for each of us is the way that we have experienced gender on a larger scale. Because gender is a set of social norms, each of us experiences that a little bit differently. We might have seen different characteristics associated with different genders depending on who we grew up with and where we grew up. And so the way that each of us conceives of our own gender identity is based off of that personal experience, not some objective truth. But because gender is a socially constructed idea, all of these things change over time. So we're all playing out our own gender identities, but some of us go against those social norms a little more directly. So what does it all mean? We live in a cishet society, a cisgender heteronormative society, which means that we have determined that cisgender is the default state of being, that you're assigned a sex at birth, and that as you grow up, you will primarily act in accordance with the set of social expectations that we have defined to be related to that sex assigned at birth. So cisgender just means that your gender identity aligns with the sex you were assigned at birth. But if you're part of that very small percentage of people who is not cisgender, you may realize at some point that your gender identity and the way you feel inside does not align with the characteristics that have been laid out for you from this cishet world. And if that ends up being the case, no matter when in your life you realize it, you kind of have to figure out what to do about it. I realized I was not cisgender later than a lot of people who are trans, and that gave me both a unique perspective on what it meant to be gender nonconforming, as well as some unique challenges. See, growing up, I did not have vocabulary to talk about or understand gender. I had a lot of characteristics that people would traditionally call feminine. It was only once I was in my mid-20s and started to be exposed to queer spaces that I developed that vocabulary for what I was feeling, that I wasn't just a man who liked traditionally feminine things, but all of those feminine traits were symptoms of this underlying feeling that my internal gender identity didn't align with my understanding of what it meant to be a man. And so I spent a good portion of my life, over 25 years, living in a gender identity that didn't align with how I felt and just not having the words to express what it really felt like inside. And those early stages of my journey were filled with a lot of uncertainty because I was so far ahead in life compared to when a lot of people realized they're trans or gender nonconforming. I questioned if those things were actually true. Because even though it felt right to how I felt inside, I would still gaslight myself. After all, I had lived all of these years as a man. There was just a part of me that didn't want to believe that something so fundamental about myself could be different than all of the beliefs and expectations that I had built over those past couple of decades. The best thing to do when you're feeling that uncertainty or you're just not sure what your gender identity is to socially transition. So when you start to use different pronouns, wear different clothes, change up your hairstyle, whatever kind of socially aligns with how you understand gender internally. It's not the way you present yourself externally that defines your gender, but taking on characteristics that society defines to be feminine or masculine, depending on what your current gender identity is, can really help you figure out if those things feel right to you. And it can just help you make sense of everything that's going on inside. That was the case for me. I started growing my hair out. I started painting my nails. First, I went by he, they pronouns, and then started to use they, them pronouns. And at each step in that journey, the move away from masculinity felt right. And that's how I started to understand my internal experience. And for me, that worked way better than sitting there and trying to figure out what was going on inside. The more I sat there, the more I analyzed myself, the scarier it got to admit to myself and to other people how I felt. And the more I thought about it, the less likely I felt like I was to do anything about it. But when I took those small steps, it not only got a lot easier to start to talk about what I was feeling inside, but it also got a lot clearer what I was actually feeling. That's what I mean when I say that gender identity is your personal experience of gender. I have a set of characteristics that are largely based on what society defines that I typically associate with being feminine or masculine. No matter how hard I try or how much I try to step outside of the binary, I see skirts as a feminine thing. I see tight clothes as a feminine thing. I see long soft hair and wearing makeup and painting my nails as feminine. As I was on my gender journey, I took all of those personal understandings of gender, tested them out, and figured out what felt right to me personally. Ultimately, gender expression is a performance. It is putting on a costume, so to speak, and acting in a way that aligns with how we feel inside about our gender identity. And for people who are cisgender, this just tends to come more naturally. For people who are gender nonconforming, there's often a more intentional or conscious element to it. Like for myself, feminine things don't come naturally, especially at first. Like painting my nails the first time felt awkward. Putting on feminine outfits and wearing women's clothes, at least the first time, felt awkward. Changing the way you dress or the way you act or the way you present yourself, especially when you've been doing that for years and years of your life, is a hard thing. So for gender nonconforming people, a lot of times it's more of a conscious decision of how we want to show up in the world. Based on our experiences with gender and the expectations of how people of different genders act and dress, we choose where we want to show up within that spectrum, or if we want to try to defy it and show up outside of it altogether. So gender expression is a performance of how you feel internally. But in order to figure out if you're actually gender nonconforming and how you do feel internally, you have to learn to trust yourself. Because if you are gender nonconforming or trans, people are going to have a lot of opinions about you. That was something I didn't experience growing up when I presented myself as a man in the world. But since I've come out, I have gotten so many unsolicited opinions about how other people see me or what other people think my identity is. So how other people see you, how you act, how you talk, how you dress, what clothes you wear, none of that defines your gender identity. All of that is expressions of how you feel internally. And so if you're trying to figure out whether you're gender nonconforming or how to show up gender nonconforming in a cishet world, you have to learn to trust that inner voice that tells you who you really are. And then once you start experimenting, whether you're fully socially transitioning, testing out different pronouns, testing out different clothes, testing out different characteristics, you have to learn to trust what feels right. And the great thing about socially transitioning and social experimentation is that most of those changes are very easily reversible. Hair always grows back. You can always change up your style, change up your clothes. You can change your pronouns with very little consequence. But if you can't learn to trust how you feel, you'll never know your personal sense of gender identity. And my favorite way to get to know myself is through stream of consciousness journaling. That type of self-reflection lets me sort through all of the voices in my head that aren't my own. And for gender nonconforming people who are trying to develop that sense of self-awareness, learning to sift through all the noise you've heard so you can hear your own voice, probably one of the most important things you can do. In a cishet world, you will be put into gender boxes by almost everyone you meet and by almost every scenario you're put in. At school, at work, at home. If you can't learn to drown that out and sift that out, it's going to be very hard to show up as your true self in a world that doesn't really know where to put you. I'm still figuring it all out, but right now this is what it looks like living as a non-binary person in a cishet world.